Operation Friendship has some unhealthy boundaries. Directed by Roland Mesa, written by Rob Ross, and shot by Levi Isaacs. Based on a story from Tales from the Crypt No. 41, drawn by Jack Davis. No brain gets left behind in today's mission. Andrew sits down to a game of chess with Philip. The old man reminisces of the times shared with his lifelong best friend. As kids, Andrew and Philip were instant pals, signing their friendship in blood. Through the years, they protected each other from bullies. The two were so close, they rejected dates from girls in high school. In college, Andrew studied medicine, while Phil pursued electronics. Of course, they attended the same school and combined their majors for some interesting experiments, like keeping a squid alive by attaching its brain to electrical currents. In the working world, they opened up their medical practice and electrical engineer offices next to each other. The two met for chess every night. Suddenly, Phil missed a day, a week, then weeks at a time. Andrew demanded to know why. Phil breaks the news. He has fallen in love. Computer programmer Nelson is really into his work. He catches Jack with news about a groundbreaking accounting program he wants to present at an upcoming meeting. But Nelson just missed that meeting. Jack took credit for the program and made promises for new features that Nelson will have to deliver. Later, Nelson bumps into his new neighbor. Once home, the excitable Eddie greets him.
Eddie, not tonight. Had a really rotten day.
Upset about Jack, Nelson isn't feeling it. Eddie wants Nelson to make a stand, refuse to be walked over. Eddie is Nelson's only friend, and Eddie only cares about Nelson. Jane, the new neighbor, knocks on the door. Her phone isn't hooked up yet, and asks to use Nelson's. Keeping Eddie out of sight, he invites her in. She checks her messages, gets a restaurant recommendation from Nelson, and heads out. Eddie is in disbelief.
Boy, a lot of fun you
Don't
are.
ever do that to me again.
I didn't do anything. She was hot. You should have asked her out.
I don't know who she is.
So what are we gonna do instead? Nothing again?
I hate eating alone. Would you have dinner with me?
Say yes.
Andrew accuses Philip of ending their friendship. Philip claims the opposite. It's natural at this age to find a wife. Their friendship will remain intact. When Philip introduces Jandra to Andrew, she's nice, but not very bright, and doesn't believe Andrew when he calls Philip a genius. Alone, Andrew cries over his friend wasting his mind on a fiancé who only wants him for his body. Nelson tells Jane about himself. She is more impressed with his talents than he is. As Jane confesses her small fear of being alone, Eddie shows up.
I know exactly what you mean.
Hi, holy mackerel! What's that knackers?
Are you alright?
As you see, Eddie is Nelson's imaginary friend. Jane tells Nelson that she works in schools, but he is distracted by Eddie's antics.
I dropped my
Is that the catch today? Looks mighty tasty.
Eddie, just give me a break, would you? Just this once, just leave me alone. I'll do whatever you want, all right?
Think we'll have that to go.
Hi.
Got it. So you're a teacher?
No. Actually, I'm a psychologist.
Say what?
Nelson opens up to Jane. They have quite a bit in common. Eddie wants to get out of there. Taking a moment to really concentrate, Nelson makes Eddie vanish. Philip marries Jandra. Andrew sits across an empty chair at the chessboard. About to take his own life, Andrew is saved by an urgent call. He is needed for an emergency lobotomy. Inspiration dawns on Andrew. He spends the next 2 years researching the human brain. Opportunity strikes when Jandra goes out of town, leaving Philip alone. Andrew lets his friend stay with him. Nelson and Jane take their time saying goodbye. Eddie waits for Nelson. He believes Jane is a threat to their lifelong friendship. Nelson thinks Eddie is overreacting. Eddie shows himself out. Nelson's concentration doesn't bring the imaginary lad back. At work, Nelson falls behind on Jack's promises. After Jack threatens Nelson's job, Eddie reappears. Nelson is happy his friend is back. He hasn't seen Jane since the night they met. Nelson and Eddie have a typical night at home until Jane knocks on the door. She's been sick for days, but feels better now and invites Nelson over for a home-cooked meal. Eddie isn't as happy about this as Nelson. Andrew and Philip play chess, just like old times. Philip is angered when Andrew theorizes that Jandra is dumbing him down. After an apology, Andrew shows off his laboratory to Philip. He plans to perform the world's first 75% lobotomy. All he needs is a patient.
I had such a great time with you the other night. I don't know, I felt so relaxed, and yet it's strange. It's almost as if there was something touching me.
Next to a sound asleep Jane, Nelson receives a surprise visit from Eddie. Nelson concentrates really hard, but Eddie won't vanish. Instead, he shows off a new sick trick.
Nelson Patrick Demirs, you think you're so smart? I'll show you what smart is!
Pretty good, huh? Sister Mary, what's her name? She never did like you much. Hey, check this out.
Hey, Demirs, you better start running!
Jimmy McKenna, boy, did he used to kick the shit out of you!
If Nelson wants the psychological torment to stop, he has to murder Jane for Eddie. He almost gives in, but Jane wakes up. At home, Eddie metaphorically throws Nelson out the window. Back at work, Nelson, clearly possessed by his questionably imaginary friend, starts walking all over Jack. The boss notices that Nelson is a completely new man. The flashback ends. Andrew has visitors. He locks up the library with Philip inside. At the door, he greets Jandra and Philip? The three sit down for their weekly chat. Jandra can't wait to leave. Philip doesn't talk much. This is how it's been for the last 20 years. Andrew says his goodbyes and returns to the library. He doesn't believe Jandra has noticed anything different with Philip when she returned from her trip 20 years ago. She's happy with Philip's body and 25% of his brain. Andrew kept the other 75%, the intelligent part of Philip's brain, for himself. At the flip of a switch, the brain in a jar can talk through a speaker. Philip's brain is angry at Andrew for separating him from the love of his life. Andrew believes he saved his friend from losing his mind. Oh, the irony. The old man and the brain argue over whose turn it is in their chess game. The playful tone of Operation Friendship's adaptation didn't leave me with much to think about once the screen faded out. Psychologist Jane serves as no more than the catalyst for Eddie's fear. We establish she was able to feel Eddie at dinner, so not using her profession to attempt freeing Nelson from his imaginary tyrant feels like a hanging thread. But she is still with the Eddie-fied Nelson. Livewire Eddie breathes life into the episode. I did enjoy his interactions with Nelson, and he showed some talent summoning a very young Ethan Suplee as Nelson's childhood bully. The comic is creepier and makes good on the promise of the title. Andrew literally performs an operation on his friendship. He gets Philip's brilliant mind, Jandra gets his immaculate body, everybody wins. Except Philip. But at least he is still lucid in playing chess, even if he is a captive brain in his friend's possession, whereas Eddie just takes over his pal's body and we kind of lose Nelson. I guess he's trapped somewhere in the ether. Make friends with the comic, maybe keep the episode as an acquaintance.
I'm gonna miss you, pal.